Years ago, I sold my couch to buy a laminator. Not metaphorically. I literally posted my used IKEA couch on Craigslist, got $75 for it, and spent $68.99 plus tax on a laminator and a pack of starter sheets. I was broke, drowning in student debt, living in a dingy one-bedroom apartment I shared with my then-girlfriend, now wife, and working a job I hated. I had just quit a short-lived stint at a car rental agency after my manager berated me in front of customers for not pushing enough insurance add-ons. I walked out, drove straight home, and laid face up on that cheap couch thinking, there's got to be more than this. That same night, I found a YouTube video of a teacher who made passive income selling printable worksheets online. They were basic, sight words, math drills, simple charts, but apparently people were buying them. A random idea sparked in my head. My mom had been a kindergarten teacher for 30 years and had cabinets full of original educational material she had created. She always used to joke that if she had $1 for every time a teacher asked for her alphabet charts, she'd be rich. So I called her. Hey, Mom. Weird question, can I use your worksheets to start an online business? She was confused but supportive. I got permission. She emailed me a few PDFs, and I cleaned them up on Canva using the free version. I watched hours of tutorials, got better at layout and design, and eventually had a pack of 15 printable worksheets. But I knew I had to stand out. Every Etsy listing was just a boring thumbnail of a worksheet. I thought if I could laminate one, make it look bright, reusable, and real, maybe it would click with people. Hence, the laminator. I made a listing called Reusable Kindergarten Starter Pack, took photos on my kitchen table using natural light, and uploaded it to Etsy. I listed it for $5.99. Then I waited. For 2 weeks, nothing. I felt dumb. My girlfriend asked gently if maybe I wanted to update my resume. Then, on a rainy Thursday, I got a notification. You made a sale. Someone in Iowa bought the starter pack. Then someone else in Oregon. Then 5 more over the weekend. I made $47 that week. Not enough to live on, but enough to make me obsess. Over the next few months, I built more packs, tracing letters, number games, flashcards, reward charts. I pulled 16-hour days, trying to figure out Pinterest, a goldmine for my demographic, SEO, how to write better titles. I joined Facebook groups for teachers and quietly lurked, learning what they complained about and what they wished existed. One day, someone in a group posted, "Does anyone know where I can get editable behavior charts for individual kids? Everything I find is so generic." I made one that night. I called it the Customizable Student Star Chart, slapped a $3.99 tag on it, and listed it. In the first month, it sold 218 copies. That was the first moment I thought, wait, this could actually be a business. Fast forward 8 months, I had 62 listings, over 4,000 sales, and I was bringing in around $200/month. Still not rich, but enough to quit gig work and go full-time. I formed an LLC called Brightpath Printables. I invested in Adobe Illustrator and hired a part-time VA from the Philippines to help manage customer service and orders. But here's where it gets crazy. One day, I got an email from someone at a district office in Texas. They were rolling out a parent at-home support initiative and wanted to know if they could license 10 of my worksheet bundles to distribute to 4,000 parents. I had never licensed anything. I didn't even know how to price it. I called a business lawyer, paid $300 for an hour of advice, and he helped me draft a basic licensing agreement. I nervously pitched $2,000 for a 6-month, non-exclusive license. They agreed without countering. From there, it snowballed. 3 months later, a homeschool influencer with over 100K followers on Instagram tagged one of my bundles in a post. I got 700 orders in 24 hours. My shop crashed. My phone buzzed so much it overheated. I cried. Like, ugly cried. Revenue went from $2,000/month to $11,000/month almost overnight. I was no longer laminating things on my kitchen table. I had outsourced printing to a pod service and converted everything into editable PDFs. I created a standalone Shopify site and expanded into digital planners for parents. In year 2, Brightpath made $148,000 in gross revenue. I paid myself a salary, maxed out my Roth IRA, and finally bought a couch that didn't smell like regret and spilled ramen. Year 3, I hired 2 stay-at-home moms as part-time content creators. They help develop new products and test everything with their own kids. The business has now passed $310,000/year, and last month, we launched a membership model $9/month for unlimited access to every printable we've ever made. Last week, we hit 10,000 members. It still blows my mind. I didn't invent anything. I didn't have venture capital or a fancy background. I just solved problems for a specific group of people and kept showing up, even when it felt dumb. Also, I still have that first laminated worksheet. It's framed above my desk. It reminds me that sometimes, the dumbest ideas, like selling laminated star charts to strangers online, can change your life. If you're sitting on an idea, something small or weird or not serious enough, try it. You don't need $1 million plan. You need $75, a laminator, and the guts to hit publish. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I never meant to be an entrepreneur. I was supposed to be a dentist. That was the plan. My parents paid for the schooling, I had the grades, and I even had a position lined up at a local clinic my uncle managed. But 5 months before I was supposed to start, I walked out of my dorm, packed my stuff into a borrowed minivan, and moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with no job, no business plan, and $1,800 in my bank account. It started with chairs. Office chairs, to be specific. A buddy of mine had just started working remote during the pandemic, and he was complaining about his back constantly. I offered to help him find a good chair, and after a little digging on Facebook Marketplace, I found a barely used Herman Miller Air and listed for $300. I recognized it from a co-working space we had interned at once and knew it was a steal. The guy selling it was moving overseas and just needed it gone. My friend was ecstatic. I helped him haul it up to his second-floor apartment, and he paid me back $300 without blinking. Out of curiosity, I looked up the chair online. Retail price? $1,300. I stared at that number for a long time. Next day, I went back on Marketplace and started scanning for similar chairs. Within an hour, I found a steel case leap for $250. Drove an hour to get it, cleaned it up with some Clorox wipes, and listed it for $600. It sold within 2 days. I flipped 3 more chairs that week. At this point, I still hadn't told anyone what I was doing. It was just a little hustle, something to keep me busy. But then I found a small office furniture liquidation company operating out of a warehouse in my city. They had dozens of high-end chairs from startups that had gone remote or bankrupt. I talked to the manager, and he was more than happy to let me take 5 chairs on consignment. I sold 4 in 5 days and made over $1,200. That's when I realized I had accidentally created a business. I spent the next few weeks deep in research. I looked into ergonomics, learned about lumbar support, materials, tilt mechanisms, armrest adjustability, everything. I joined forums, read reviews, watched teardown videos. I could now tell a fake Herman Miller from a mile away. I started writing detailed listings, explaining exactly why this chair would help your back, how it was better than the $100 knockoff you'd find on Amazon. Sales doubled. By the end of month 2, I had sold 31 chairs. I was netting over $6,000. I moved into a bigger apartment with a garage and started stocking more inventory. People were driving from 3 hours away to test the chairs in person. I invested in a GoPro and made a YouTube video comparing 5 top-tier chairs. It went semi-viral, got picked up on a productivity subreddit, and my DMs exploded. That's when I hit my first wall, supply. The liquidation company couldn't keep up with my demand, and local listings had dried up. I started driving to other cities, Chicago, Detroit, Pittsburgh, renting U-Hauls and filling them with chairs I'd pre-negotiated over the phone. I sometimes drove 10 hours round trip in a day. Around this time, I gave the business a name, Sitwell. I bought the domain, slapped together a Shopify site, and started taking orders online. I offered local delivery for free and shipping options for other states. I watched YouTube tutorials on packaging and fulfillment and hired 2 college students to help me clean, test, and pack chairs in exchange for $15/AHR and free Red Bull. I also started offering a 30-day trial. I'd take chairs back, no questions asked. Out of 60 returns, only 4 ever came back, and in better condition than I sold them. Trust was everything. Sidwell hit $100K in sales by the 9-month mark. Then came the email that changed everything. It was from a procurement officer at a mid-sized startup in Austin. They'd seen one of my blog posts comparing ergonomic chairs and wanted to order 50 steel-case chairs for their hybrid team. I didn't even have 50 at the time, but I said yes. I scrambled, called every supplier I knew, pulled favors, flew to Atlanta to pick up 17 chairs personally, rented a freight truck, partnered with a logistics guy on Craigslist, and got them delivered in a week. The invoice was $4,38000. It was my biggest sale by far. That deal became my blueprint. I started targeting small companies and remote teams. I rewrote the website copy to speak directly to them. Your team deserves to sit well. I added bulk order forms, offered Zoom consultations, and started cold emailing HR reps. By year 2, Sidwell had hit $720K in sales. I rented warehouse space, hired 3 full-time employees, and finally paid myself a proper salary. But here's the thing. I never scaled the business into a massive corporation. I never took on investors or tried to be the Uber of chairs or whatever nonsense the tech bros kept suggesting. Instead, I focused on doing one thing better than anyone else, matching people with the right chair, at a fair price, without the usual industry BS. I started offering office setup consultations, turned my YouTube into a review channel, and built a loyal following. Some customers bought chairs for themselves, then returned a year later to buy for their entire team. 3 years in, Sidwell is a 7-figure business. We have a team of 9. We now refurbish chairs in-house and offer our own warranty. I've had to turn down acquisition offers because I'm not done building yet. Sometimes I think about what my life would have been like if I'd taken that dentist job. Steady paycheck, long hours, maybe a nicer car by now. But I also know I'd never have experienced the rush of flipping my first chair, or the chaos of that Austin order, or the joy of seeing a Reddit post where someone says, "Got my chair from Sidwell. My back thanks me daily." It's funny. People think entrepreneurship starts with a grand idea. But sometimes it starts with a sore back and a good chair. And a willingness to say yes, even when you have no idea how you're going to pull it off. 3 years ago, I was working in the basement of a second-rate co-working space, building a software platform I thought would change the world. Spoiler alert, it didn't. But what came next set me on a path I never expected. I had just burned through the last $7,000 of my savings trying to get a SaaS tool off the ground that helped freelancers automate invoices, proposals, and contracts. The problem? I built it for myself, not for the market. It was clunky, too complicated, and had exactly 17 active users. 4 of them were family. I had no runway left, no VC interest, and I'd already maxed out a credit card trying to keep the servers running. I remember sitting in a diner across from my roommate, eating pancakes we couldn't afford, ranting about how I was going to have to give up and get a job. He looked at me and said, "Why don't you stop trying to build something new and fix something broken instead?" That hit me. The next day, I started poking around on Reddit, Twitter, niche forums, looking for rants. Real, pissed-off posts from people frustrated with the tools they had to use. One thread caught my eye. A few small e-commerce store owners were absolutely flaming this popular inventory management tool. Too slow, too ugly, too expensive. I'd met the loudest complainer. His name was Kevin. He ran a Shopify store selling eco-friendly pet supplies and said he'd been looking for an alternative for months. We got on a call. I asked him to show me exactly what sucked. That 45-minute Zoom call became my blueprint. I didn't start building yet. I called 3 more store owners. I watched them work. I saw the clicks, the confusion, the convoluted spreadsheets. Then I mocked up a dead simple dashboard in Figma and sent it to Kevin. His reply was, "If you build this and it works, I'll pay you next week." So I built it. In 14 days, I put together the first version of what would become StackTrack, a lightweight, real-time inventory tracker that synced with Shopify, had just the features people needed, and none of the bloat. No onboarding wizard, no analytics dashboards, no machine learning, just a clean UI and accurate counts. Kevin paid me $79 that next week. It was the first dollar I made online from something that wasn't consulting or freelance. 2 more of the shop owners I talked to signed up, then 3 more through word of mouth. By month 2, I was making $1,500 MRR. That doesn't sound like much, but to me, it was everything. I've been chasing unicorns and finally found a pony that actually ran. Here's the weird twist. Around month 4, Kevin emailed me and said he was talking to a guy named Mark who ran a network of 8 stores and was drowning in inventory chaos. He wanted to talk. I hopped on a call with Mark, showed him the product, and he said, "This is cute, but I need more. I'd pay you 10x if you can build it for multi-location with supplier tracking." My first instinct was to say no. It was just me. I had no money, no help, and no idea how to scale this thing. But I needed the money. I took the gig on the condition that he paid me 50% up front. He wired $2,000 the next morning. I started writing code like a man possessed. I was pulling 14-hour days, surviving on instant noodles, trying to keep both versions alive. When I pushed the multi-store beta, Mark sent me another $3,000 and added 4 of his stores to it. I realized this wasn't a one-size-fits-all product. It was more like Lego blocks. Everyone needed the same foundation, but they wanted to build different towers. So I turned StackTrack into a modular platform. Store with one location? Use the core. Chain of 10? Add supplier management, warehouse sync, and purchase order history. By the end of year 1, I had 62 paying customers and $11,000 MRR. I was profitable. I still worked out of that same basement. Then came the copycats. Around month 15, I started getting messages from users saying, "Is this your product?" I saw something like it called InventSync. I looked it up. A clone. Same features, cheaper pricing, and the founder was running Google ads on my brand name. It felt like getting punched in the chest. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't outspend them. I couldn't outmarket them. So I emailed every single customer I had, not a marketing blast, but real messages. I asked what they loved, what they hated, and what they needed next. I started shipping features weekly, responding within minutes to tickets, and creating small Slack groups for my top customers. I basically turned StackTrack into the most customer-obsessed little company on the planet. Slowly, my churn dropped to under 2%. InventSync folded 6 months later. By year 2, I had hired 2 contractors, one for front-end, one for customer support. We crossed $28,000 MRR, and I finally paid myself a real salary. I got out of debt. I moved out of the basement. I bought a couch. But the real moment came when Shopify themselves emailed me. One of their product leads had heard about StackTrack through a partner. They were looking to feature a few high-performing apps built by solo devs in their ecosystem newsletter. I thought it was spam. It wasn't. We got featured. I had to upgrade my servers twice in 48 hours. We hit $50,000 MRR 2 months later. Now, 3 years in, StackTrack does $92,000 MRR, employs 6 full-timers, and still doesn't have a sales team. We don't need one. Everything is inbound. People talk. People remember how you made them feel when their whole inventory system crashed and you personally answered a support ticket at 1 a.m. on a Sunday. Looking back, I'm glad I failed that first time. I built what I wanted, not what people needed. Now I just listen better. Entrepreneurship isn't always about disrupting industries or building billion-dollar unicorns. Sometimes it's about fixing one painful, stupid, annoying thing and doing it better than anyone else. So if you're in the middle of your own $7K in the whole phase, just know there's a way through. And it might not be flashy. It might just be functional. But that's where the magic is. It started in a basement with peeling paint, a thrift store couch, and a Wi-Fi signal that came and went like a moody cat. I was 29, laid off from a mid-tier marketing firm, and recently dumped by my long-term girlfriend who told me I lacked ambition. Fair, I guess. I had coasted through jobs, clung to routines, and let the inertia of average carry me. Until the day my bank account hit $147.03 and I realized I didn't want a job. I wanted to build something. I remember the exact moment it clicked. I was trying to sell an old camera lens on eBay. A niche vintage Zeiss lens from the 80s I'd picked up at a flea market for $25. I listed it poorly, blurry photos, generic title, but still got 8 bids. It sold for $212. That felt like alchemy. I spent the next 2 weeks obsessed. I raided every pawn shop, estate sale, and dusty antique mall in a 50-mile radius, flipping old camera gear. I made a quick $1,000, then $3,000. It wasn't consistent, but it was intoxicating. Soon, I ran into a wall, inventory. Good lenses were hard to find, and local supply dried up. But I noticed something odd. The listings with the best photos, detailed descriptions, and serial number verification sold for way more than the others. Most sellers were amateurs. What if I could be the best seller of vintage lenses on the internet? So I built a website. Well, I say built, but it was a clunky Shopify template with a borrowed logo and a /$9 domain, retrooptics.com. I branded myself as the go-to source for restored, guaranteed, legacy lenses. I hired a college kid off Craigslist to help me take pro-grade photos and even paid an old camera repair tech in Ohio to certify lenses for $25 a pop. It worked. Within 6 months, I was pulling in $12K month in revenue. After expenses, I was barely scraping by, but I had a business. Then, the first real curveball hit. A customer in Germany claimed their lens was scratched and unusable. They wanted a full refund. I offered it, apologetically. But they trashed me on Reddit, photography forums, even YouTube. Overnight, I lost 60% of my sales. I was crushed. But the feedback stung for a reason. It was true. I'd never opened the lens. I took the tech's word for it. That was the moment I realized I couldn't scale without control. I needed to learn the craft. So I did. I took online classes, read old repair manuals, and spent every night dismantling $20 lenses to learn how they ticked. Fast forward a year, and I had turned my one-man hustle into a small workshop of 3. We didn't just sell lenses, we restored them. We cleaned, aligned, calibrated, and tested each one. I trademarked a new name, Obscura, and rebuilt the site. Clean, black and white, minimal design, focused on bringing legacy optics to the digital age. We started getting noticed. YouTubers who reviewed vintage gear asked for test units. One reviewer with 400K subs called our lenses museum quality meet street ready. That video brought in $20K in orders in a week. I hired my younger brother, who had been drifting between jobs, to handle logistics. I brought in my old college roommate to build a real back-end system. We integrated a database of over 2,000 lens models, with user reviews, sample photos, and historical pricing. Customers loved it. Obscura was doing $50K month by the end of year 2. But here's where it gets messy. I got approached by a big online camera retailer. Let's call them Camport. They wanted to partner. Basically, they wanted to buy from us wholesale and resell under their brand. On paper, it was great. Guaranteed volume, logistics help, visibility. I almost signed. But my gut screamed no. They were going to slap their logo over my product, dilute the quality, and drop us the second we couldn't meet volume. So I declined. 3 months later, they launched their own vintage lens division. Glossy website. Big budget. Half-ass products. I was furious. And then, something amazing happened. People noticed. Customers started posting side-by-side comparisons. Camport sent me a fungus-ridden knicker. Obscura's version was pristine. Forums lit up. Our sales tripled. We hit $150K month. I opened a second workshop, this time in Austin. We started offering international shipping. A major Japanese optics company even reached out for a collaboration. I said yes. Why not? And then, COVID hit. Supply chains collapsed. Shipping delays killed trust. Our Japanese partner paused production. One of our workshops had to shut down due to exposure. Refunds spiked. We burned through cash. There was a moment, 2 days into April 2020, where I stood in our empty workshop, looked at a stack of unsold inventory, and thought, this is it. We're done. But I wasn't ready to let go. So we pivoted. I made a wild decision to sell DIY lens repair kits. I filmed YouTube tutorials, wrote PDF guides, and turned every remaining part into a teachable tool. And it worked. People were stuck at home and craved a project. The kits sold out in 2 weeks. We offered Zoom classes. We built a community of hobbyists, tinkerers, artists. It wasn't just about optics anymore. It was about craft. By 2021, we were profitable again. In 2022, we passed $2 million in revenue. I paid off my parents' mortgage. I moved out of the basement. Today, Obscura employs 19 people across 3 cities. We've restored over 15,000 lenses. We even started a film photography grant for young artists. And sometimes, when I walk past a thrift shop or see a dusty camera bag at a garage sale, I stop and smile. Because in the blur of risk and grind and failure and revival, I built something real. From a $25 flea market lens. In 2016, I was a 26-year-old night manager at a mid-range hotel chain in Ohio. I had no college degree, $3,000 in savings, and a soul-sucking sense that I was going nowhere. The job was stable, sure, but I spent most nights watching the CCTV feed, arguing with drunk guests, and wondering if this was it for me. Then came what I call the cold sandwich moment. I was heating up a half-eaten tuna melt from lunch at 3:14 a.m. in the staff microwave. My coworker, Angela, said to me, "You know, you're too smart for this. You ever think about doing your own thing?" I shrugged it off, but that question festered. The next night, I opened my cracked screen laptop and Googled business ideas for broke people. 2 weeks later, I found it: liquidation pallets. You've probably seen the YouTube videos. People buying returned Amazon or Walmart goods in bulk and reselling them individually. I wasn't expecting gold bars, but I figured if I could flip a few items on eBay or Craigslist, I could slowly build capital. I spent my entire $3,000 on my first pallet, sight unseen. It was marked as General Electronics and Accessories, and I had it delivered to the garage of my tiny one-bedroom apartment. When the truck dropped it off, I was giddy. The pallet looked like a Christmas tree of broken dreams. Headphones missing cords, Bluetooth speakers with shattered cases, for smartwatches without bands. But there was some gold: a mint-condition GoPro, a Wi-Fi mesh system still in the box, and a working pair of Beats headphones. I sold all of it within a week and made $1,800 profit. I reinvested. Hard. I started going to auctions, buying unclaimed storage units, estate sale leftovers, even mystery boxes. My tiny garage turned into a full warehouse of inventory, and I was shipping out 10 to 15 packages a day. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, helped with listings, logistics, and photos. We worked like animals, slept 4 hours a night, and lived off ramen and frozen pizza. By the end of 2017, I'd made $68,000 in profit. In 2018, I quit the hotel job. That was when things got complicated. See, I wasn't the only one who caught wind of the pallet flipping craze. More sellers entered the market, and suddenly prices were rising while margins were shrinking. My returns dropped by nearly 40%. I needed a pivot, something sustainable. So I looked at what I did best: curation, sorting the junk from the gems. My wife suggested we start a mystery tech box subscription. We called it Bike Crate. The idea was simple. For $30/month, subscribers would get a box of curated, functional tech, headphones, chargers, accessories, novelty gadgets, and the occasional big score like a smartwatch or fitness tracker. We used the best stuff from our pallets, cleaned and tested everything, and packaged it with quirky, branded notes. We launched with 47 subscribers, mostly friends and friends of friends. 3 months in, Bike Crate hit 300 subscribers. 6 months in, 1,200. I rented a 3,000-square-foot warehouse, hired my first full-time employee, and made a shipping deal with a regional courier to lower our costs. By mid-2019, we were clearing $35K/month in revenue, with 28% profit margins. I paid off my credit cards, bought a used pickup truck, and moved into a modest house with my now wife. Then came the Facebook post. One of our subscribers shared a photo of a Bike Crate box that included a limited edition Pokemon Game Boy, which I'd thrown in as a nostalgic Easter egg. The post went viral, 20,000 shares in a week. Our wait list ballooned to 15,000. We weren't ready. We scrambled. I maxed out every supplier I had. We brought in temp workers, doubled warehouse shifts, even hired a friend's catering company to feed the crew during all-nighters. We fulfilled every order, but it nearly broke us. And then COVID hit. March 2020. Shipping delays, supply chain nightmares, and a flood of competitors entering the subscription box space almost buried us. We lost 40% of subscribers in 3 months. I laid off half the team. My wife and I went back to packing boxes ourselves, just like in the early days. But we didn't fold. We pivoted again, this time to refurbished laptops and tablets for remote workers and students. Using the same liquidation channels, we secured large lots of off-lease laptops, refurbished them in-house, and launched a new brand, Byte Renew. That saved us. By late 2021, Byte Renew was doing more revenue than Bike Crate ever did. We signed B2B contracts with 3 school districts and a nonprofit that distributed affordable tech to underserved communities. That's when it hit me. We'd become more than resellers. We were solving a real problem. Today, in 2025, we have a team of 38 people. We operate out of a 12,000 square foot facility. Bike Crate still runs, though it's smaller. Byte Renew is the main engine, and we've refurbished over 18,000 devices to date. Last year, our revenue crossed $6.2 million. And I still remember that tuna sandwich. What I've learned is this: you don't need a massive idea. You just need to solve one tiny problem in a way that makes people feel something: hope, delight, value, nostalgia. Then scale it with ruthless consistency. Entrepreneurship isn't a lightning bolt. It's erosion. 1,000 nights of work. 1,000,000 quiet doubts. A single microwave lunch at 3:14 a.m. that changes your life. To the night workers with cracked phones and big dreams, I see you. You're already building it. Don't stop. I was 24, broke, and faking success. On Instagram, I was living the dream. Brunch photos with stacked pancakes, blurry rooftop shots with cocktails, inspirational quotes over beach sunsets. You know the type. But in reality, I was sleeping on a futon in a shared apartment with 2 roommates and dodging calls from my credit card company. I had dropped out of college my senior year to start my business. That was the pitch, at least. In truth, I hated my major, and I wanted to escape the cycle of being told what to do by people who didn't seem any happier than I was. So I walked away, convinced I'd find my path. For 2 years, I dabbled in everything: drop shipping, affiliate marketing, social media management, even tried selling a branded line of planners on Etsy. All fizzled out within months. The planner thing stung the most. I printed 500 units. I sold 12. Then, one night, everything changed because of a 15-second interaction. I was walking back from a job interview I'd completely bombed. I passed by this tiny coffee cart parked in an alley downtown. The guy running it had a hand-painted sign that said, "No Wi-Fi. Talk to each other." I liked that. I bought a coffee and told him I liked the vibe. He laughed and said, "Yeah, that's all people really want. A little vibe. The coffee's just an excuse." That line stuck with me. I started visiting the cart every morning. It was this old, converted tricycle with a tiny espresso machine bolted to the back. The guy's name was Marco. He had been doing it for 5 years and said he made enough to cover rent and take his daughter on trips. No stress, no boss. That was the moment I realized I'd been chasing the wrong dream. I didn't want scale, I wanted freedom. So I started sketching. My idea was build a better mobile cafe, but make it cool, clean, minimal, Scandinavian with tones, soft LED lighting, plants hanging off the edges. A mobile coffee space that looked like an Apple store had a baby with a greenhouse. I called it Drip and Bloom. I had no money, no experience in carpentry or design, and no background in coffee. But I had YouTube, Google, and one maxed-out credit card. I spent 6 weeks designing the card in Blender, mostly by following tutorials at 2x speed. I pitched the concept on Instagram with a slick mock-up, pretending it was already in progress. Got 200 likes. One DM from a girl I hadn't spoken to in years. OMG, I would totally visit this. That was enough fuel to keep going. I found a junk trailer frame on Craigslist and rented a storage unit to work on it. The first version was a disaster. Would split, hinges didn't align, the canopy snapped off in a breeze. I cried in that storage unit more than once. But I kept going. Nights and weekends. Watching woodworking videos and rewiring electrical diagrams. I learned how to insulate panels, how to mount a faucet, how to seal gaps. It took 4 months. I launched the first Drip and Bloom card in April. Parked it at a farmer's market with a borrowed espresso machine and secondhand beans. I was nervous no one would show. By 9 a.m., there was a line. They weren't just buying coffee. They were taking photos, tagging the account, asking if I was a franchise. I made $412 that day. I'd never made that much money in one day in my life. The next week, I did $980. By month 3, I was doing $3,000, $5,000 a month in profit. I reinvested every cent, built a second card. Hired my roommate to run it. The turning point was TikTok. I posted a behind-the-scenes time-lapse of me cleaning the cart and restocking beans. It got 280,000 views in a day. Suddenly, people were emailing me from Austin, Denver, even Toronto, asking how to start their own cart. So I pivoted. I launched a digital course called Start Your Own Coffee Cart, priced it at $99 and included my exact blueprint, material list, suppliers, wiring diagrams, menu templates, and a Canva kit for branding. It was basically everything I wished I had when I started. The first week, I sold 19. That was $1,881 overnight. 6 months later, I had sold over 3,000 copies. Drip and Bloom became 2 businesses. The actual coffee carts, I had 5 now, running in different parts of the city, and the digital education side, which was way more scalable and way more passive. By year 2, I cleared $400,000 in revenue. I paid off my debt, moved out of the apartment, and finally got real health insurance. Now, I'm 27. We've helped launch over 400 carts worldwide. I'm building a full platform with cart builders, bean suppliers, and a map to find local indie vendors. Kind of like Airbnb, but for mobile cafes. I'm still not rich in the tech bro, not party way. But I wake up at 6 a.m., make coffee, walk my dog, and decide what I want to work on every day. That's the real dream. And all of it started because of a broken espresso machine on a tricycle in an alley. 3 years ago, I was managing a coffee shop in a strip mall and living paycheck to paycheck. Now I own a $1.8M/your e-commerce brand that started with selling stickers on Etsy. Here's how it happened. Back in 2021, I was 27, burnt out, and constantly broke. I had an art degree, a mountain of student debt, and no clear idea of what I wanted out of life. I spent most of my free time doodling, making sarcastic little cartoons, and dreaming about being one of those people who made money online. It all started with a dumb joke. One night, after an exhausting double shift at the cafe, I sketched a cat sitting on a pile of existential dread with the phrase "today's mood" scrawled underneath. I thought it was funny, so I slapped it on Instagram. My 400 followers, mostly friends and art school folks, loved it. Someone commented, "I put this on my water bottle." That stuck with me. So I Googled how to make stickers at home, bought a Cricut machine, some glossy sticker paper, and started printing my designs. They weren't perfect, but they were good enough. I opened an Etsy shop with 5 designs. 0 expectations. I priced them at $3.99 each, with free shipping, just to test the waters. I made my first sale 2 days later, then 3 more the next week. By the end of month 1, I had made $212. Not earth-shattering, but I remember screaming in my apartment when Etsy deposited the first $58 into my account. I kept going, drew more, posted regularly, improved my packaging, learned how to cut stickers cleanly, and upgraded my printer. I watched every Etsy tutorial I could find on SEO, product photos, and customer retention. Month 3 $1,022. That was the first time I thought, wait, this might actually go somewhere. I made a rule for myself. All profits go right back into the business. I bought more materials, experimented with holographic paper, created themed sticker packs, and added handwritten thank you notes to every order. By month 6, I was doing about $3.5K in revenue monthly, averaging 10 to 15 orders a day. It was thrilling, but also a full-time job on top of my full-time cafe job. I was burning out. My turning point came in the most millennial way possible. I made a TikTok. It was a 15-second video showing my day in the life packing sticker orders. It got 11,000 views and 92 sales in one weekend. That had never happened before. My shop ran out of stock. I had to call in sick to the cafe to catch up. I made more TikToks. Some flopped. A few blew up. A month later, one video, just me showing my new sticker designs and saying here's what I've been working on, hit 1.6 million views. I made $9,000 that week. That was the week I quit the cafe job. I was terrified, but I told myself, give it 6 months. Worst case, I go back and beg for my job. I didn't need to. My tiny Etsy sticker shop turned into a full-on brand. Sarcastic, slightly unhinged art on everyday objects. Stickers turned into pins. Pins turned into notepads. Then keychains. Then mugs. I hired my sister to help me pack orders. We converted my living room into a mini warehouse. I launched my own Shopify store, built a newsletter, hired a freelance designer to help with merch ideas. At the 1-year mark, I'd made $312,000 in revenue. But here's the twist no one talks about. Success is weirdly lonely. My friends didn't really get it. A lot of them thought I was just playing around with arts and crafts. Even when I showed them my numbers, they'd go, "That's wild." But I could tell they didn't see it as legit. People on the internet, strangers, treated me more seriously than people in my real life. I also realized I had no idea how to run a real business. Taxes, inventory forecasting, order fulfillment, accounting, it all hit me like a brick. I made dumb mistakes. I forgot to restock my bestsellers before Christmas and lost out on $20K in potential sales. In year 2, I brought in a friend with retail experience as a part-time ops manager. She helped me streamline the back end. We moved operations into a 900 square feet rented workspace. My sister became full-time. We added 3 part-time shippers during Q4. I also started wholesaling to small indie bookstores and gift shops. That was another unexpected boost. One of our repeat wholesale clients now accounts for $70K/year in orders alone. Year 2 ended with $790K in total revenue. In this year, year 3, we're on track to cross $1.8 million. We now have 12 employees, 5 full-time, and I pay myself $82K/year, which still blows my mind. We've been featured in BuzzFeed, HuffPost, and a bunch of curated TikTok lists. But none of that matches the feeling of that first $58 deposit. People always ask me, what was the secret? There really wasn't one. It was consistency, humor, listening to my customers, and being willing to look dumb while figuring stuff out. If you're thinking of starting something, honestly, do it. Start small. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just make something you like, put it out there, and see what sticks. I built a $4M/your business by accident, and then nearly lost it all because I didn't know how to be a CEO. In 2017, I was a broke, 27-year-old freelance web developer living in a dusty one-bedroom in Phoenix, Arizona. I had no grand startup ideas, no funding, no co-founders. What I did have was frustration. Every few weeks, a client would ghost me, change scope without paying more, or send me 3-paragraph emails nitpicking font sizes. I hated being a freelancer. One Friday night, after a particularly infuriating Zoom call where a client told me their nephew who knows HTML could do my job faster, I had a bit of a breakdown. I opened a Google Doc and started writing everything I wished clients knew before hiring a developer. It was blunt, borderline mean, but it felt honest. I called it How to Not Suck at Hiring a Web Developer. I posted it on my barely used Medium account and forgot about it. By Monday morning, it had 40,000 views. Turns out a bunch of developers felt the same way and started sharing it on Hacker News and Twitter. I woke up to dozens of messages from freelancers, agencies, and even CTOs saying things like, "This is gold. Do you offer consultations?" That's when a strange idea hit me. Instead of just ranting, what if I turned this into a product? So I stayed up late every night for 2 weeks building a little PDF course called DevReady, essentially a guide for founders and non-tech people on how to hire and work with developers. I priced it at $29. No fancy funnel, just a Stripe link. I launched it with a single tweet. I made $5,800 in the first 24 hours. I couldn't believe it. It was the most money I'd ever made in a day. I updated the site to look slightly less garbage, bought a real domain, and started writing blog posts every week. Why MVPs fail, 10 mistakes startups make with devs, the cost of cheap freelancers. Each post brought in more traffic. And DevReady kept selling. By end of month 3, I'd made $40K. More than I'd ever made in any job. I thought I had made it. But here's where the real story begins. In early 2018, a VC-backed startup bought 200 copies for their incubator program. That felt huge. They then asked if I could do a custom workshop. I charged $3,000. The feedback was great. Word spread. Soon, I was doing monthly workshops for accelerators, selling site licenses, even giving talks at startup events. By 2019, I was making over $500K a year solo. No employees. Just me, Stripe, and Gmail. Then someone emailed me asking, "Can you help us find a good dev team?" I said no, but the request stuck in my mind. I started building a list of vetted freelancers and agencies I trusted. A mini network. Nothing public. Just referrals. Eventually, I put up a form on my site. Need a developer? Tell me what you're building. I'd then match them with someone from my list and take a cut if the project closed. I called it DevMatch. Super original. To my shock, that started making more money than the course. In 2020 alone, DevMatch pulled in $1.2 million in closed deals. I took 20%. Suddenly, I had a real business, and I had no idea how to run it. I was still doing everything: marketing, sales calls, support emails, invoicing. It was chaos. I was working 70-plus hour weeks, burning out. I hired my first employee in 2021, then another, then a project manager, then a head of partnerships. I read The E-Myth and tried to delegate, but I didn't know how to lead. Every decision still came through me. People were confused. Clients were unhappy. One agency ghosted on a $60K project, and I had to refund half of it out of pocket. By mid-2022, things were cracking. Revenue was great, nearly $3.8 million that year, but margins were thinning. My best people were quitting. I'd grown too fast, with no systems and too much ego. The lowest moment came when a client wrote a viral LinkedIn post trashing DevMatch for unreliable, overhyped devs. We lost 3 major accounts in a week. I spent 2 days in bed. I seriously considered selling or shutting it down. Then I did something I'd never done before. I asked for help. I reached out to a founder friend who had scaled and exited a SaaS business. We met for coffee. He grilled me like an investor. What are your ops metrics? Who owns delivery? What's your churn? NPS? I had no good answers. He offered to mentor me for free. Over the next 6 months, I rebuilt the business from the inside. We cleaned up operations, installed KPIs, hired a real ops lead, and fired 2 underperforming agencies we'd been tolerating because they made money. We stopped taking every client and focused on startups raising seed to Series A. I built a knowledge base, created onboarding SOPs, and delegated real ownership to team leads. It wasn't fun, but it worked. In 2024, we hit $4 million in revenue with 42% margins. I work 35-hour weeks now. We're fully remote, 12 people. I'm not rich, but I've paid off my debt, bought my mom a car, and saved more than I ever thought possible. Looking back, the product didn't change much. What changed was me. I started as a developer with a grudge and a blog post. I became a founder who thought revenue solved everything. Then I almost burned it down by refusing to grow up. Now, I'm a CEO, not just in title, but in practice. If you're early in your journey, let me just say, making money is the easy part. Building something that lasts is the hard part. But it's worth it. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I never thought I'd be one of those people who'd start a business. Growing up, I was always the kid with the big dreams, but they never seemed to line up with reality. I wanted to be an artist, a writer, or even a musician, but I wasn't good enough at any of those things to stand out. So, like many people, I followed this safe route. I went to college, got a decent job in a cubicle, and just tried to make it through each day. But that life wasn't for me. It didn't take long for me to realize that I had no real passion for the 9 to 5 grind, and something needed to change. It all started on a Tuesday afternoon, just another day stuck in the office. I was scrolling through Reddit during my lunch break, as one does when avoiding work, and I stumbled across a post about side hustles. The post was about how people were turning simple ideas into full-time businesses. It wasn't anything groundbreaking. Some were selling things on Etsy, others were doing freelance gigs. But something clicked in my brain. Why not me? I thought. I had always been decent with technology and a bit of a problem solver. Maybe I could start my own side hustle and see where it goes. I spent the next few weeks doing a ton of research. I didn't have any experience in business, so I needed to learn everything I could. I watched hours of YouTube videos, read blogs, and even took a few online courses. It was overwhelming, but exciting at the same time. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I needed to find something that didn't require a huge upfront investment. I didn't have a lot of savings to risk, and the thought of pouring my money into something that could fail was terrifying. One night, while I was sitting at my desk, staring at my computer screen, the idea hit me. I was researching how to make extra money with tech skills, and I found a post about building websites for small businesses. That was it. I could build websites. I had learned some basic coding in college for fun, and though I wasn't an expert, I was confident I could pick it up quickly. The next few months were a blur. I spent every spare second learning how to build websites, reading up on design principles, and understanding the ins and outs of user experience. I took on a few small projects for friends and family to build my portfolio. At first, it felt like a hobby, but the more I worked on it, the more I realized this could actually turn into something bigger. But here's where the real challenge began: marketing. I had no idea how to get clients. I wasn't going to go around knocking on doors, and I didn't have the budget for ads. I had to figure out a way to get noticed without spending money. So, I turned to social media. I created a simple website showcasing my work and posted about it on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Reddit. Slowly but surely, I started getting inquiries. Some were from local businesses looking to upgrade their outdated websites. Others were startups that needed an online presence from scratch. I remember my first paid project like it was yesterday. It was for a small local coffee shop that wanted a new website. They agreed to pay me $500 for a simple site. I was ecstatic. That was more money than I had made in a long time, and I was getting paid to do something I actually enjoyed. It was a small victory, but it gave me the confidence I needed to take things to the next level. I kept working on my business on the side while still holding on to my full-time job. But as the weeks went by, the side hustle started to grow. I began charging more for my services as my skills improved and my portfolio expanded. I eventually reached a point where I was making more money from my side hustle than I was at my day job. That's when I knew it was time to take the leap. I quit my job and decided to go full-time with my business. The first few months were terrifying. I had no steady paycheck coming in, and there were times when I doubted my decision. But I kept pushing forward. I started networking more, joining online communities, and collaborating with other freelancers. Slowly, the work started to flow in. I began taking on bigger and more lucrative projects. I invested in tools to streamline my workflow and improve my designs. I even hired a part-time assistant to help with the administrative tasks. It wasn't always easy. There were months when business was slow, and I had to get creative with my marketing. I started offering discounts for referrals, and I reached out to old clients to see if they needed any updates or additional services. Eventually, word of mouth worked in my favor, and I started to build a steady stream of clients. A year into my full-time business, I was able to hire my first full-time employee. I'd gone from working alone in my bedroom to managing a small team. It felt surreal. But with the new responsibilities came new challenges. I had to learn how to manage people, handle client expectations, and navigate the financial side of things. But every obstacle was a lesson. I realized that success in business isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about learning from them and adapting. Fast forward to today, and my business is thriving. I've expanded my services, and I now offer digital marketing, SEO optimization, and branding. I've worked with clients from all over the world, including some big names. I'm not a millionaire, but I'm comfortable. I'm doing what I love, and I've built a life that's far more fulfilling than anything I could have imagined in my old 9-to-5 job. More importantly, I'm in control of my future. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many times when I wanted to give up, when I thought I wasn't good enough, but I pushed through. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you don't need to have everything figured out from the start. You just need to take that first step, even if it's small. The rest will follow. If you're thinking about starting your own business or side hustle, my advice is simple: just do it. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because it will never come. Start small, keep learning, and never stop improving. It's a bumpy ride, but it's worth it. I'm living proof that anyone can make it happen if they're willing to put in the work. I remember when I first started my business. It was a time in my life when I felt like I had everything to prove. I was 26, fresh out of college with a degree in business, and no real direction. Like so many people my age, I had a ton of ambition but not much experience. The one thing I was sure of, though, was that I wanted to do something that would change my life. I just didn't know what that would be yet. My idea came to me on a late-night binge of Netflix and endless scrolling through social media. I had seen these tiny house living shows, and I was fascinated by the idea of minimalism and the freedom of living in a small, mobile space. The more I looked into it, the more I realized that people were making huge moves in the tiny home market. There was a demand for people looking to downsize, live off-grid, or just experience a simpler life. I had the aha moment. This was it. This was my opportunity. The problem? I had zero construction skills and no idea how to build anything from the ground up. I had to start learning fast. I began by reaching out to local builders, but every contractor I spoke with either laughed me off or quoted ridiculous prices. After hearing "you're crazy, kid" one too many times, I realized I had to do this on my own. I started reading every book I could find on construction, watched endless YouTube tutorials, and even took a couple of online courses. I learned how to frame a wall, wire electricity, and even how to install plumbing. All basic stuff, but it was enough to get started. I didn't have much money to work with. All my savings from part-time jobs throughout college had been spent on rent and living expenses. So I borrowed money from my parents. They didn't love the idea at first, but they agreed to lend me the $10 I needed to buy materials and get a small piece of land. With no experience, but a lot of grit, I set out to build my first tiny home. The process was slow and full of setbacks. I'd be up at 6 a.m. cutting lumber and working until sunset. I'd come home covered in sawdust, tired and sore, but I was driven. Every mistake, every failure was a lesson, and I kept moving forward. I remember the first time I thought I had really screwed something up. I was installing a window, and as I tried to secure it, I dropped it. The window shattered into pieces. I was devastated. I stood there staring at the mess for what felt like hours, wondering if I had made the worst decision of my life. But then I picked up the pieces and went back to the store to buy another window. After nearly 6 months of hard work, my first tiny house was finally complete. It was far from perfect, but it was mine, and it was a tangible representation of all the sweat and tears I had put into it. I listed it on a few platforms and got a decent amount of attention, but no one was buying. I was beginning to think I had wasted all that time and money when a local family reached out to me. They wanted to see the house. I was nervous, but I invited them to take a look. When they stepped inside, their faces lit up. They loved it. After a couple of meetings and negotiations, I sold the house for a decent profit. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to prove to myself that this crazy idea could actually work. I used the money to build another tiny house, and this time, I was more confident. I knew I could do it. Over the next year, I built and sold several more tiny homes. Business started to pick up, and word of mouth spread. People were impressed not only with the quality of the homes, but with how quickly I was able to complete them. I was doing something different. I wasn't just selling homes. I was selling a lifestyle, an escape from the hustle and bustle of the world, a way to live simply and sustainably. It wasn't long before I had a full-fledged business on my hands. But, as it often goes, things didn't stay smooth for long. I ran into issues with suppliers who couldn't meet my growing demand. I had trouble managing the increasing number of projects I was taking on. Some months, I barely had enough cash to cover expenses, and I was constantly worried about whether I could make payroll. But I pushed through. I hired a small team, took on more work, and streamlined my processes. By the time I hit my 3rd year in business, I was fully booked for months in advance. I started thinking bigger, looking at ways to scale the business. That's when I made my next bold move. I started a tiny home rental business. I bought more land, set up a few tiny homes for vacation rentals, and marketed them as eco-friendly getaways. People loved the idea of living off-grid for a weekend, and bookings flooded in. This opened up a whole new revenue stream for me. Not only was I selling homes, but I was also making money by renting them out. As my business grew, I faced even more challenges. Competition increased, my production costs rose, and I had to keep innovating to stay ahead. But I learned to embrace those challenges. They were part of the process. Every setback was an opportunity to improve. By the time I was 30, I had a successful tiny home business with a solid team of employees, multiple rental properties, and an expanding customer base. It was nothing like what I had imagined when I first started, but it was better. I had built something real, something I could be proud of. Looking back, I can't help but think about how much I've learned, not just about building homes, but about entrepreneurship, about resilience, and about trusting myself. I didn't have a clear path when I started, but I knew I wanted more than just a regular 9-to-5 job. It wasn't easy, and there were plenty of moments where I thought about quitting, but in the end, it was all worth it. If there's one thing I've learned on this journey, it's that the path to success is rarely straightforward. It's messy, full of bumps and bruises, but if you stay focused and keep pushing forward, you might just surprise yourself with what you can achieve. I'm proud of what I've built, but I know this is just the beginning. The tiny home movement is only getting bigger, and I'm excited to see where it goes. For now, though, I'm enjoying the ride, knowing that if I could turn a crazy idea into a successful business, anyone can. If you've got a passion and a willingness to work hard, there's no limit to what you can do. I remember the exact moment I decided I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't some big revelation or a flash of inspiration. It wasn't even a conversation I had with a mentor or friend. It was a simple yet life-altering event. I was sitting in my small, cramped office cubicle, staring at my computer screen. The same screen I had been staring at for years while working as a mid-level marketing manager at a tech firm. I hated the work. I hated the monotony. I hated the idea of sitting in that office for the next 20 years just to scrape together a few vacations a year and a modest retirement package. I had big dreams, and the office cubicle felt like a cage. That day, I'd just gotten off a call with my boss, who was thrilled with the team's quarterly numbers. I, on the other hand, was ready to scream. It wasn't the success that was bothering me, it was the way we were achieving it. I'd worked on countless campaigns, sitting for hours coming up with innovative strategies that were really just recycled ideas. I was good at it, sure, but it was suffocating me. That's when I made the decision. I didn't know how, and I didn't know when, but I knew I had to get out. I had to build something of my own, something that was entirely in my control. So, I quit. Without a backup plan, without a safety net, and without a clue of what the next step would be. I remember telling my best friend a few days later. He looked at me like I was crazy. You just quit your job, with no plan? You've got a mortgage, car payments, and you're talking about building something? That's insane. But his skepticism didn't faze me. Deep down, I knew I had to take the leap. It was either that or live the rest of my life as a cog in the corporate machine. I spent the first few months doing what most new entrepreneurs do, stumbling around in the dark, trying to figure out what the heck I was doing. I wasn't even sure what kind of business I wanted to start. My background was in marketing, so I thought about starting an agency. But the thought of managing clients and juggling multiple projects didn't excite me. It felt like I would just be trading one set of problems for another. After some soul-searching and countless late-night brainstorming sessions, I finally hit on an idea. I had a passion for travel, and over the years, I had become somewhat of an expert at finding cheap flights, hotels, and vacation deals. Friends would always ask me for advice on how to travel on a budget, and I loved helping them. What if I could turn that into a business? I could create a platform that helped people plan affordable vacations, offering personalized advice, deals, and travel hacks. I spent the next 6 months building my website, creating content, and reaching out to potential partners. I learned how to code a basic site, created a business plan, and did everything myself. There were days when I felt completely overwhelmed. I remember working long nights, often staying up until 3 a.m., and then waking up at 7 a.m. to continue the grind. It was exhausting, but I loved every minute of it. Eventually, I launched the site, and the response was underwhelming. Sure, I had a few people visiting, but not nearly enough to make any significant income. For the first time, I felt like a failure. All that hard work, all those sleepless nights, and it wasn't paying off. But I refused to give up. I took a step back, evaluated what was working and what wasn't, and then completely overhauled my marketing strategy. I focused more on social media, reaching out to travel influencers, and offering free resources that would drive traffic to my site. Slowly but surely, the traffic started to pick up. I started getting emails from people asking for personalized travel advice, and even a few from companies wanting to collaborate. About a year into my journey, I made my first real sale. I had partnered with a hotel chain to offer discounted stays to my users, and someone actually booked a room through my site. The commission was small, but to me, it felt like a huge victory. It was proof that I could make this work. I wasn't just building a business. I was creating something that people found value in. As the months went by, my business grew. I expanded my services, offering custom vacation packages, exclusive discounts on travel gear, and even launching a paid membership for premium content. My income steadily increased, but the best part was that I was finally living life on my terms. I could work from anywhere in the world, and I no longer had to answer to a boss or follow a set schedule. But the journey wasn't without its challenges. There were times when I doubted myself, when I questioned if I had made the right decision. There were moments when I thought I should go back to my corporate job, where at least I had a steady paycheck. But I stuck with it, constantly learning, adjusting, and growing. One of the hardest lessons I learned was that success wasn't linear. Some months were amazing, while others were brutal. The key was persistence and the willingness to adapt. Over time, I brought on a small team. I hired a few freelance writers, a virtual assistant, and a part-time developer. Slowly, the business began to run more smoothly. I wasn't bogged down with every little task, and I could focus on scaling the business. As I reflect on the journey now, I realize how much I've changed. I went from a corporate drone, trapped in the 9 to 5 grind, to a business owner who is in control of his own future. I learned that the road to entrepreneurship is far from easy, but it's also incredibly rewarding. The freedom, the sense of accomplishment, and the ability to create something from nothing, it's all worth it. The best part? I'm no longer sitting in a cubicle, staring at that same computer screen. I'm sitting on a beach in Thailand, sipping a coconut, checking my sales numbers, and planning my next big project. It's surreal, but it's real. And if I can do it, anyone can. The key is to take that first step, even when you have no idea where it will lead. Now, I'm not saying it's always easy. Some days I still wake up and wonder if I'm doing the right thing. There are ups and downs, and sometimes it feels like the universe is testing me. But the difference now is that I have control. I have a vision, and I'm working toward it every single day. Looking back, quitting my job was one of the scariest things I've ever done. But it was also the best decision of my life. If you're stuck in a job that doesn't fulfill you, if you feel like you're just going through the motions, I encourage you to think long and hard about what you really want. Entrepreneurship isn't for everyone, but for those who are willing to take the leap, it can be the most rewarding journey you'll ever undertake. So, to anyone reading this who's on the fence about starting their own business, take the leap. Don't wait for the perfect moment. The perfect moment will never come. Instead, create your own moment. It's the only way to start. It was a rainy Tuesday morning when I realized I was about to make the biggest decision of my life. I had just turned 30, was working a 9 to 5 job at a well-established marketing firm, and had been climbing the corporate ladder for almost a decade. But something in me snapped that morning. I had spent so many years helping other businesses grow, crafting strategies, and driving revenue, but I had never once put that knowledge into my own venture. My dreams were always sidelined by the comfort of a stable paycheck. That day, I decided to take the plunge and finally do what I had always wanted, start my own business. I'll admit, I wasn't exactly a stranger to entrepreneurship. I had dabbled in a few side hustles here and there. In college, I sold custom t-shirts online, and I briefly tried dropshipping a few years ago. But those ventures never took off. They fizzled out as quickly as they started because I lacked the commitment and didn't have a clear vision. This time, however, felt different. I felt the fire within me, the drive to finally create something lasting. I remember the moment I decided on my idea. It was a late night, and I was sipping on some cold coffee as I scrolled through social media. It hit me that there was a serious gap in the market for affordable, sustainable, and stylish office furniture. Everyone was either buying cheap, poorly made items from big box stores, or paying exorbitant prices for premium, designer furniture. There was no middle ground. People needed a more sustainable and affordable option for their office spaces. I could do that. I could create a brand that offered high-quality office furniture that was both functional and beautiful, but also sustainable and reasonably priced. The next step was terrifying. I had no capital to start with. I wasn't rich by any means, and I had no family to support me financially. I was going to have to bootstrap this idea. I'd spent my savings on living expenses, student loans, and the usual. But I wasn't about to let that stop me. I decided to take a risk, one that would either make or break me. I spent the next few weeks researching everything I could about sustainable materials, design trends, manufacturing processes, and logistics. I reached out to manufacturers overseas, learning about the supply chain and cost structures. I dove into the world of e-commerce platforms, learning how to build a website and market my products online. I knew nothing about the furniture industry, but I wasn't afraid of the learning curve. I wasn't about to let a lack of knowledge hold me back. With a small loan from my personal savings and a few $100s I managed to scrape together, I took the leap and placed my first order with a manufacturer. I knew that if I wanted to make this work, I had to create a unique brand that stood out. I hired a graphic designer to create a logo and a website, and I spent hours poring over copywriting, making sure the brand messaging resonated with customers. I wanted to communicate a sense of simplicity, elegance, and sustainability. It wasn't just about selling furniture. It was about offering a solution to the everyday worker's needs, while also doing something good for the planet. Then came the launch. My website went live, and I was excited beyond belief. I shared it on social media, told my friends and family, and hoped for the best. The first few days were slow. No surprise there. But then something happened. People started clicking. They started buying. It wasn't a flood of orders, but it was enough to keep me going. The validation I needed was there. The business could work. But with that success came a whole new set of problems. The orders I received were small, but they were coming in faster than I expected. The customer service emails piled up. There were delivery issues, returns, and requests for refunds. I didn't have a team, just me and a few contractors helping with logistics and design. I worked around the clock, trying to juggle everything while also handling the day-to-day operations of running a business. One of the biggest challenges I faced was scaling. I wasn't prepared for the growth. It didn't happen overnight, but over time, the demand for my products grew exponentially. I had to figure out how to keep up with it. I took out a small loan to hire my first employee, a customer service representative. I also partnered with a fulfillment company that could handle storage and shipping, so I wouldn't have to do it all by myself. Slowly, I was able to put processes in place that helped streamline operations. Then came the next hurdle: competition. Other companies started offering similar products at cheaper prices. I had to adapt. I couldn't afford to lose my edge, so I doubled down on what made my brand unique: sustainability. I invested in more eco-friendly materials, partnered with green initiatives, and built a community around the idea that doing business sustainably wasn't just good for the environment, it was also good for business. I worked on content marketing, educating consumers about the importance of choosing sustainable products and how it could make a difference in the world. By the end of my second year, my business had grown beyond what I had ever imagined. We had a small team, a robust customer base, and a solid reputation for quality. It wasn't easy, though. There were days when I wanted to quit, days when I didn't think I could keep going. But the vision of creating something meaningful, something that could have a positive impact on the world, kept me moving forward. Fast forward to today, and my company is a leader in the sustainable office furniture market. We've expanded into new categories, and we now offer products for both home and commercial offices. We've raised significant investment to further fuel growth, and I've learned more than I could have ever imagined about running a business. I'm not where I want to be yet, but I'm proud of how far we've come. The journey wasn't easy. It took years of hard work, late nights, failures, and sacrifices. But I'm glad I took that risk. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also the most rewarding. I look back at the person I was 5 years ago, comfortable in my job, afraid to take the leap, and I barely recognize her. Taking that first step was the hardest part, but it was also the most important. If there's anything I've learned along the way, it's this: you'll never know how far you can go unless you're willing to take the first step, no matter how scary it is. If you're thinking about starting your own business, don't wait for the perfect time. There will never be a perfect time. You just have to start. Take the leap, put in the work, and trust the process. It won't be easy, but it will be worth it. I promise you that. I never thought I'd be here today, writing a post about how I built a business from scratch and how it changed my life in ways I never imagined. But here I am, sharing my journey, hoping it will inspire someone else to take that leap, just as I did years ago. It all started with an idea, and that idea came to me on a particularly rough day. It was 2016. I had just turned 30, and things weren't going well. I had been working at a corporate job for almost 8 years, handling marketing for a mid-sized company. The pay was decent, but the work was draining. I felt trapped in a routine that I didn't see a way out of. It wasn't just that I hated my job, it was that I hated the idea of spending the next 30 years of my life doing something that didn't excite me. But I didn't have a plan. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and worse, I had no idea how to get out. That was when I decided to start reading more. I figured that if I could learn something new, maybe I'd discover an opportunity one could pursue. I went through dozens of books on business, marketing, and entrepreneurship. One book in particular stood out to me, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries. I remember reading it late into the night and suddenly feeling like I had been hit with a bolt of lightning. It wasn't just the ideas in the book that caught my attention. It was the realization that I could start a business without having a massive amount of money or a big team behind me. It could be done in small steps, and I didn't have to wait for some perfect moment to begin. I didn't know exactly what kind of business to start, but I knew that I needed to do something. I had a deep interest in the health and wellness space, and I had been using a lot of natural supplements myself for the last few years. I knew there was a growing market for products that were good for you, but I didn't want to just start another generic supplement company. I wanted to create something unique, something that truly helped people. After a lot of brainstorming, I decided to launch a line of vegan protein powders. It wasn't just about the protein itself, but about building a brand that aligned with the growing movement toward plant-based diets and sustainability. The first step was figuring out how to actually produce the product. I didn't have a background in manufacturing, so I started researching. I contacted suppliers, asked for samples, and spent countless hours experimenting with different formulas. There were days when I felt like I was in over my head, but I kept pushing forward. It wasn't just the product I had to get right, it was the brand itself. I needed to find a way to differentiate myself in an already crowded market. The breakthrough came when I realized that people weren't just looking for a product, they were looking for a lifestyle. They wanted to feel like they were part of something bigger than themselves. I started building the brand with that in mind, creating a company culture that was centered around health, fitness, and sustainability. I wanted to create a community, not just sell a product. In 2017, I launched my company with just a small social media following. I didn't have a big budget for ads, so I relied on organic growth. I posted every day on Instagram, showing behind-the-scenes footage of the brand's development. I reached out to influencers and offered free samples in exchange for honest reviews. Slowly but surely, people started taking notice. Sales trickled in, then grew steadily. At first, it was just a small side hustle, but within 6 months, I was able to quit my corporate job and focus on the business full-time. It wasn't all smooth sailing. I made plenty of mistakes along the way. One of the biggest was underestimating the complexity of running an e-commerce business. I initially thought that building the product and website was the hard part, but as it turned out, the real challenge was handling logistics, customer service, and fulfillment. I had to hire a small team, and even then, it was a constant juggling act. There were times when I'd stay up late packing orders myself, trying to figure out how to make everything run more efficiently. In 2018, we hit a major turning point. We landed a partnership with a well-known fitness chain, which gave us a huge boost. Suddenly, we were in front of thousands of potential customers. But this success also came with a whole new set of challenges. With growth came higher demand, and we had to scale quickly. I remember thinking that this was the moment that could either make or break the business. I'm not going to lie, it was stressful. There were days when I doubted myself, when I questioned whether I had made the right decision to go all in on this company. But I kept reminding myself why I started. I was building something I believed in. And if I could just make it through these rough patches, I could build something even bigger than I had ever imagined. Fast forward to 2020, and my company had grown far beyond what I could have hoped for when I started. We were no longer a small side project. We had a full-fledged team, multiple products, and a loyal customer base. We expanded our product line to include vegan supplements, meal replacement shakes, and even fitness accessories. By 2021, we hit 7 figures in revenue, and I knew that I had truly made it. But even then, I was always looking ahead. I knew that success in business wasn't about sitting back and resting on your laurels. It was about constantly innovating and adapting to change. Looking back on that journey, I can't believe how far I've come. There were so many moments when I felt like giving up, but each time I pushed through, I learned something new and valuable. If there's one piece of advice I can offer to anyone who's thinking about starting their own business, it's this. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because it will never come. Start where you are, with what you have. Take small steps, and just keep moving forward. You'll learn as you go. And when the tough times come, and they will come, remember why you started. That will be the thing that keeps you going when everything else feels impossible. I'm now in a place where I can focus not only on growing my business, but also on giving back. I've partnered with several organizations that promote plant-based diets and sustainability. I've also been able to hire people who share my passion for health and wellness, and it's amazing to see how far we've come as a team. It wasn't an easy road, but it was definitely worth it. If you're out there reading this and you've been thinking about starting your own business, I want you to know that it's possible. You don't need a perfect plan or a ton of money to get started. You just need an idea, determination, and the willingness to learn and adapt. The rest will fall into place if you stay focused and keep pushing through the hard times. It was the summer of 2015 when I decided to take a leap of faith. I was working a cushy 9-to-5 job in corporate marketing, a field that promised stability and a steady paycheck. On paper, my life was picture perfect. I had a great salary, a nice apartment, and weekends off to relax. But something inside me was always restless. I spent my nights lying awake, scrolling through the stories of entrepreneurs on Reddit, marveling at their success, and wondering if I was missing out on something. One evening, I came across a post about a young guy who built a multi-million-dollar business from nothing. The story hit me like a ton of bricks. Here was someone who had taken risks, failed countless times, but had also found success on the other side. It was that story that triggered the idea that would change my life forever. I started my journey the next morning. I didn't have a grand business idea or a perfect plan, just a burning desire to create something of my own. I knew I didn't want to spend the next 20 years working for someone else, building their dreams while mine faded into the background. I wanted to create something real, something that could leave a lasting mark. The first challenge I faced was figuring out what business to start. I had no background in tech, no deep knowledge of any industry, and I wasn't exactly rolling in capital. What I did have was a strong sense of curiosity and a willingness to learn. So, I started reading. I devoured books on entrepreneurship, marketing, and finance. I listened to podcasts and watched countless YouTube videos on how to start a business from scratch. My first idea was to create an online store. I had always loved fashion, so the concept was simple: create a brand that sold unique, high-quality clothing. I thought the market was ripe for a fresh, edgy brand that didn't take itself too seriously. I spent weeks researching suppliers, designing mock-ups, and drafting a business plan. I even spent all my savings, about $3,000, on setting up a website and purchasing initial inventory. Looking back, it was the worst business idea I could have chosen. The competition was fierce, and I had zero knowledge of how to market or sell clothes online. After several months of struggling to get sales, I realized I wasn't going to make it in that space. My inventory sat untouched, collecting dust in my bedroom closet. But instead of giving up, I saw it as an opportunity to learn. I took a step back and reflected on what went wrong. I realized I had chosen a product I loved, but didn't understand deeply enough. I hadn't thought through the logistics, nor had I researched the market thoroughly enough. The whole venture was a collection of mistakes, but each one taught me valuable lessons. That's when I decided to pivot. I had spent months experimenting with different ways of marketing the clothing line, and in the process, I had become somewhat proficient with social media advertising. I was particularly good at running Facebook ads and targeting the right audience. It was through this process that I realized there was a massive demand for digital marketing services, something I could offer to small businesses who didn't have the time or expertise to run their own ads. With no formal training in digital marketing, I set out to learn more. I enrolled in online courses, read articles, and experimented with running ads for other small businesses. Within 6 months, I had my first paying client, a local cafe that needed help increasing foot traffic. I ran ads on Facebook and Instagram, optimized their website for conversions, and helped them target a more relevant audience. Within a few weeks, their business grew by 20%, and they were thrilled. That success gave me the confidence to start a digital marketing agency. I began reaching out to small businesses in my area, offering my services at a fraction of what the larger agencies charged. My reputation spread quickly, and before I knew it, I had a steady stream of clients. But I was still working a full-time job, which meant I had to balance both. My days were spent in back-to-back meetings, my nights dedicated to scaling my side hustle. In early 2017, I was able to quit my job and go full-time with my digital marketing business. I was scared, but I knew it was now or never. The next few years were a blur of long hours, client calls, and late-night strategy sessions. But it paid off. By the end of 2019, my agency was pulling in over 6 figures in revenue, and I was finally able to hire a small team to help manage the workload. Looking back, the road to success was anything but linear. There were so many moments of doubt, moments where I felt like giving up. The early days were brutal, and the setbacks were crushing. But I learned to embrace the struggle, to understand that failure was just a stepping stone to growth. Every mistake, every rejection, was an opportunity to improve and refine my approach. The most rewarding part of this journey was the ability to help others. By 2020, I had expanded my services to include consulting for other entrepreneurs, helping them scale their own businesses. The most fulfilling moments were when I saw my clients succeed, when I heard the stories of how my strategies had helped them transform their businesses. The turning point came in 2021 when one of my clients, a small e-commerce company, saw their revenue skyrocket after implementing a series of Facebook ads and SEO strategies I had recommended. They went from barely scraping by to becoming a leader in their niche. Their success story was featured in a popular business magazine, and it brought in an avalanche of new clients for my agency. That was the moment I realized just how far I had come. The business didn't stop there. I continued to scale, adding new services like email marketing and content creation. By 2023, I had expanded my team to over 20 employees, and my agency had become a well-respected name in the industry. But even with all the success, I still remember where I started. I remember the sleepless nights and the fear of failing, the feeling of being stuck in a job I hated. And now, as I look back, I realize that those early days were the foundation for everything that followed. My journey hasn't been easy, but it's been worth it. I'm not saying I've made it, but I'm proud of how far I've come. There were no shortcuts, no secret formulas, just grit, persistence, and a willingness to learn from every failure. If you're thinking of starting your own business, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment or the perfect idea. Start now, make mistakes, and learn along the way. If you keep going, success will eventually find you. I had no idea what I was doing when I started my business. I was fresh out of college, working a job that barely paid the bills, and I was tired of living paycheck to paycheck. I remember that day so vividly. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I had just received another rejection from a job I thought I was perfect for. I was in the middle of a lunch break, scrolling through my phone in the break room when an ad popped up for an online business course. I thought, why not? I didn't have anything to lose at that point. That night, I signed up for the course. It wasn't cheap, definitely more than I had to spend, but I figured if I didn't start taking risks, I would never move forward. The course was called The Side Hustler's Blueprint, and it promised to teach you how to launch an online business from scratch with minimal upfront costs. I barely knew anything about running a business or even what type of business I could start, but it sounded like my best shot. For the next few weeks, I dove into the content. It was overwhelming at first. There was so much information on how to build a brand, how to market, how to create a product that people would want to buy. But the more I watched the lessons, the more I started to get excited. I realized that I didn't have to be a genius or a billionaire to make money. I just had to work hard, learn as I went, and stay consistent. The first step was choosing what kind of business to start. I remember brainstorming ideas for days. I was considering everything from selling handmade jewelry to starting a blog about travel, but nothing felt quite right. I knew I needed something that could bring in steady income without requiring a ton of upfront investment. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw an influencer talking about a new trend in fitness, a line of resistance bands that were supposed to help with at-home workouts. It clicked. I had seen a lot of fitness products on social media, and while many of them were cool, they all seemed pretty basic. But these resistance bands had a unique design that caught my eye. They were compact, lightweight, and came in a variety of colors. I realized that if I could get my hands on a similar product and market it correctly, I could build a brand around it. I spent the next couple of weeks researching suppliers, learning about branding, and figuring out how to set up an online store. At this point, I was still working my 9-to-5 job, so I'd dedicate my evenings and weekends to my new venture. I set up a website using a basic Shopify template and spent hours perfecting my product descriptions and choosing the right photos. I even wrote a blog post about the benefits of resistance bands, hoping to draw in some organic traffic. Once everything was ready, I launched my store. I was terrified. I had invested all my savings into the product and the website. I thought, if this doesn't work, I'll be stuck with a ton of inventory and no way to sell it. But to my surprise, the sales started coming in. It wasn't a flood, but it was enough to get me excited. I remember the first time I saw a notification on my phone that I had made a sale. I was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee, and I nearly spilled it all over myself when I saw the email. I couldn't believe it. Someone had actually bought my product. I knew I was just getting started, so I reinvested every penny back into the business. I bought more inventory, optimized my website, and started running Facebook ads. I focused on creating high-quality content for social media to build my brand. I didn't have a huge budget, but I was willing to learn and hustle. I spent hours every day researching ways to improve my ads, my website's conversion rate, and my customer service. I felt like I was living two lives, my job during the day and my business after hours. By month 3, things started to pick up. I had built a small but loyal customer base. I was getting positive feedback, and even though I wasn't yet making enough to quit my job, I could feel that I was on the right path. Then came the breakthrough. I decided to partner with a fitness influencer who had about 50K followers on Instagram. I sent her a free set of my resistance bands, and she posted about them on her account. Within hours, my website traffic spiked, and my sales went through the roof. It was like a switch flipped. More influencers reached out to me, asking for collaborations, and I saw my products being featured on fitness blogs and social media. I had finally cracked the code to gaining exposure. The next few months were a blur. I was working full-time and trying to scale my business at the same time. I hired a couple of part-time employees to help with order fulfillment, and I learned how to outsource some of my tasks so I could focus on growing the brand. By the end of my first year, my side hustle had turned into a full-time business. I had finally hit the milestone I had been dreaming about, enough sales to support myself without having to rely on my day job. It felt surreal to finally walk into my boss's office and hand in my resignation letter. I remember that moment so clearly. It was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. I had done it. I had turned a simple idea into a real business. That first year was tough. There were countless sleepless nights, moments of doubt, and times when I almost threw in the towel. But looking back, I know it was all worth it. My business is still growing, and I've expanded my product line to include more fitness accessories and apparel. I'm now able to work from home, travel when I want, and enjoy the freedom that comes with being my own boss. What I learned through this process is that there's no magic formula for success. It takes hard work, persistence, and a willingness to learn from your mistakes. There were so many things I didn't know when I started, but I kept moving forward and didn't let fear or uncertainty hold me back. Now, I'm not just an entrepreneur. I'm living proof that anyone can turn an idea into a thriving business if they're willing to put in the work. I'm incredibly proud of what I've accomplished, but I know I wouldn't be here without all the challenges I faced along the way. I think the most important lesson I can share is that success isn't about having a brilliant idea. It's about being willing to learn, adapt, and never give up. If I can do it, so can you. And if you're thinking about starting your own business, don't wait for the perfect time. The best time to start is right now. You'll figure it out as you go. I grew up in a small town, surrounded by more cows than people. The only source of entertainment was going to the local diner and listening to the old men argue about politics. The idea of success wasn't something you could see. It wasn't in the houses, the cars, or even the jobs. But there was always a sense that if you wanted to get out, you had to figure it out for yourself. My parents, both teachers, made sure I knew what hard work meant. It wasn't easy, but it was a life that I accepted until one afternoon changed everything. It was during my last year of college that I began thinking seriously about the future. I had a decent job working as a barista, but deep down I knew it wasn't going to get me where I wanted to go. I wanted to do something bigger than myself. I didn't know what exactly, but I knew I had the drive to figure it out. That's when I came across an article about a guy who built a business from the ground up by selling custom t-shirts online. At first, I didn't think much of it, just another story about some lucky guy who hit it big. But then it stuck with me. I spent the next few weeks diving deep into the world of e-commerce. I started reading everything I could about starting an online store, from building a website to sourcing products and even basic SEO. I remember staying up late, reading articles about Facebook ads and Instagram marketing, feeling this quiet excitement building inside me. But there was one problem: money. I didn't have enough to start my own t-shirt business. I didn't have a rich uncle or access to investors. But what I did have was the ability to be resourceful. So, I did what any broke college student would do. I sold my car. It wasn't a fancy car by any means, just an old Honda Civic, but it was worth a few $1,000s. I used that money to buy a basic design course and get some initial inventory for my t-shirt business. I didn't know anything about running a business, but I was willing to learn the hard way. At first, it was slow. Like, really slow. I sold a few shirts here and there, but nothing substantial. I would spend hours designing new graphics and setting up my online store, but the sales just didn't come. I began to doubt myself. Maybe this was all a waste of time. Maybe I was just another kid chasing an impossible dream. But I wasn't ready to give up yet. I was broke, but I wasn't ready to lose. That's when I learned the most important lesson of all. Failure is part of the process. After several months of tinkering with my business, I decided to try something different. I changed my approach. I focused on creating designs that were relevant to specific niches, things that would resonate with small but passionate groups of people. I created a design for people who were obsessed with a particular video game, another for coffee lovers, and another for people who loved a specific sports team. Slowly but surely, those designs started to sell. It wasn't an overnight success, but things began to pick up. I realized that selling wasn't just about the product itself, but about understanding your customers and speaking directly to their interests and emotions. My brand began to have a personality. I started using social media to showcase my designs, and as my following grew, so did my sales. I spent less time worrying about the logistics of running the business and more time focusing on marketing and connecting with my customers. I started to reinvest every penny I made back into the business. I hired a freelancer to help me design more products, a social media manager to handle my accounts, and a fulfillment center to ship out the orders. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was building something real. A few months later, I made my first 5-figure month in sales. But it didn't stop there. As my business continued to grow, I realized there were more opportunities. I launched new products, like hoodies and mugs, and expanded into international markets. I focused on building a brand, not just selling random products. My focus shifted from making quick money to creating something sustainable that would last. However, even with all this success, things weren't perfect. I faced challenges, big ones. There were months when sales dropped, and I had to adjust my strategy. There were times when my personal life took a hit because of the amount of time I was dedicating to my business. And there were moments when I doubted myself, wondering if I could keep going. But I kept reminding myself of why I started. I was building something from scratch, and that meant facing challenges head-on. Fast forward a few years, and I've built a company that now employs dozens of people. We've expanded into new product lines, grown our social media following to over 1 million, and even opened our own brick-and-mortar store. I've gone from that broke college student selling t-shirts out of my apartment to running a multi-million-dollar business. I still can't believe how far I've come. But the most rewarding part of this journey isn't the money or the success. It's the people I've met along the way. My team, my customers, and even the influencers I've worked with have shaped my life in ways I could never have imagined. They've made me a better person, a better leader, and someone who understands that success isn't just about what you achieve. It's about who you become along the way. I'm still learning every day. Running a business is a never-ending journey, and there are always new hurdles to overcome. But if you had told me back then, when I sold my car and risked everything on a dream, that I'd be where I am today, I would have laughed in disbelief. But now, I know that anything is possible if you're willing to work for it, learn from your mistakes, and never, ever give up. It's funny, looking back on it now, how something as simple as reading an article about a guy selling t-shirts online could change the course of your life. That one little spark led me to where I am now, and every day, I wake up grateful that I took that leap. I'm proof that even if you come from nowhere, you can build something incredible. You just have to keep going. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.